You're listening to an Explore Finland radio show podcast. Hello, this is Mark Wiltshire and thanks for choosing to listen to the Explore Finland radio show in partnership with Glenn Murray, the Nordic Tourist. For this episode, I'm really happy to welcome a new guest and a friend. Michael Hutchinson-Reis is a fellow Londoner with Finnish roots and a close connection to the nearby town of Kuortane. Thanks to Tuomas Ojejärvi for connecting me to Michael, although, to be honest, I already knew him. It's a small world, is Finland. This is part one of another two-part episode about the fascinating tar-making industry in Finland. In this episode, Michael and I will discuss the historical significance of tar-making to Finland and to the wider world. Then, in episode 2, we look more closely at the Terwaviikko, or Tar Week, festival in 2022. An event that takes place every 3 years in the woods nearby to Kuortane. Before we get started, I thought I'd give a mention to a few other people. To a listener, Lisa S., who wrote to me a few years ago saying that her family heritage is from this area, as she has 3 grandparents who were born in Kuortane. So I hope you enjoy these 2 episodes, Lisa. And also to my friends Damien and Päivi. Päivi was my guest for the earlier episode about ice cream, which was also in Kuortane where she lived. That was until Damien dragged her away to live in Australia. Miss you guys. Anyway, Lisa and Päivi, if you have any stories related to this subject, I'd love to hear them. But now let's hear my conversation with Michael Hutchinson-Reis, which was recorded outside, so you're going to hear some wind noise and the occasional clanking of chains from the nearby frisbee golf course. So Michael, thanks for joining me today and thanks for inviting us into the woods here on the edge of Lake Kuortane.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about this Terwaviikko here in Kuortane, but also about the whole culture of making tar. So I guess my first question is, what is tar and how do you make it?
Well, technically, I'm not a chemist, but technically the tar, and the tar we're talking about here is wood tar specifically. There are different types of tar and also pitch. People tend to use the term pitch and tar interchangeably, but we're talking about wood tar here. And it's a viscous, dark liquid, fluid, and it's made up of carbons and free carbons. I don't know exactly what the chemical makeup is, but basically, as I'm going to explain to you, it's actually derived. It's actually dried. In this instance, the way we're doing it here is dry distilled from bits of wood from tree. In this case, it's going to be it's pine. So it's all pine. So this is a viscous fluid, like oil. When you see it, it's like crude oil. There are other parts of the world where tar arises naturally, like in Trinidad, where my family come from, my father's family come from. You've got the tar lake, Pitch Lake, where the tar just comes out of the ground, like oil, like crude oil, it comes out. And that's used for making tar macadam, which people are very familiar
because people will know the name tar and tarmac being a sort of derivation from that, but that's produced more naturally out of the ground, and then what we're talking about is something where it's man-made.
And if we're talking about the production of wood tar, I'm going to keep saying wood tar here. So to be more specific, the production of wood tar in this area has been going on since the 16th century. Now, in Scandinavia, wood tar has been a specific product unique to this region, and also on the Russian side as well. But it's been very important in that it's a sealant, it's waterproof, and also it can be used for flavoring food, it can be used for shampoo and soap, it can be used for all sorts of things. But historically, the importance of tar, wood tar, here in this area of Scandinavia, and particularly in this area part of Finland, in Ostrobothnia, southern Ostrobothnia, is that the tar has been sold, and it's been sold internationally. You can imagine 400 years ago, 300 years ago, tar from this area was being sold, exported out of this area, Finland, which then belonged to Sweden, around the world. And guess who the biggest customer was?
America.
Nope. No, biggest customer was the British Royal Navy.
Oh, really? So you just said before that it was used for sealing. Is that, are we talking about boats and roofs?
That's
Were there
right.
other uses?
That's right.
As well?
Yeah. So the biggest and most popular use for this tar produced in this area was to seal the wood on these sailing ships.
Yeah. Okay.
And to stop them rotting when they get wet, and also to stop the woodworm. And then also, I think I mentioned sometime before when we were talking that it's actually part of the British kind of language that we talk about British sailors being Jack Tar or Jolly
Yes.
Jack Tar.
Yeah.
Well, they used to wear these straw hats, and the straw hats were dipped in the same tar to waterproof them and seal them. And that's where you get the term Jolly Jack Tar.
Right. And then tarred and feathered, I guess, was a punishment.
Well, tarred and feathered is that wasn't. I mean, that wasn't why the stuff was sold out of southern Ostrobothnia, but that was one of the uses people put it to. So they put it to all sorts of uses. But the other thing, I think, if we're going to talk about the history, I just want to show you something that was given to me today. And this is a map. This is a map of Kuortane, and it lists 400 plus tar pits that were basically in the backyards or in the woods of local farms. Now you've got to understand that the reason that southern Ostrobothnia, Etelä-Pohjanmaa, is so different from other parts of Finland is that there's a long history of farming where the farmers were family farm, you know, it's a family farm, dairy. They used to have sheep here, some cattle, but mostly dairy, and then of course crops like wheat and barley and so on. But every farm or a group of farms quite close to each other, and usually they would be related to each other because everybody's related here, because you stayed on the land that you owned. So people are kind of quite related.
As people can see from the map, you know, the Kuortane is a town on the edge of Lake.
Yeah,
Kuortane.
I wouldn't call it a town though. I'd call it a village.
Okay, well then I was being complimentary, but it is, and and these pits that are marked out on the map are spread over quite a wide area.
Yeah, I was just looking.
And 400 is quite.
That's the ones that we know of.
Yeah.
There were probably more. We don't know how many more. But the thing about it was that the income that these small family farms got, the additional income that they got, was considerable from producing tar. So it was a kind of literally a cottage industry.
Yeah.
But every farm had their cows, their sheep, their maybe chicken, and then they had their forest where they got the wood from, and then they also got their dairy products and their wheat and everything, and then on top of that they had tar. Now tar was then exported out of this area and sold to the British Navy, for instance, eventually.
So it helped the GDP of the whole country, essentially.
And that's why, you know, if you go to other parts of Finland, they always talk about, oh yeah, Etelä-Pohjanmaa is where they got all the big houses and people are so proud and everything. Like, there's a bit of a kind of cultural kind of stereotype about these people here in Etelä-Pohjanmaa. We're so proud, and we got bigger fields, bigger tractors, bigger everything, and we got bigger houses. And you know, like, you've noticed the houses are on steroids. You know that they're. Have you noticed the old farmhouses that are narrow at the bottom and bigger at the top?
Yes.
They look like they're kind of been to the gym, and so.
So this kind of came from the wealth that the tar industry created all those years ago.
It was wealth. And then also, I have to get into the politics, because I've just been saying again today that when I first came here years ago, because my wife is from here, my Finland, I came to Finland when I was a kid in 1961. I was 6 years old in 1961. But my Finland was a different Finland. It was a Swedish-speaking Finland on the coast down south in Porvoo. And my family were kind of, you know, petty bourgeois townspeople. They were soldiers and seamen. They were sea captains and so on. And that's very different from the culture here, where it's like you own your land and you farm and you stay, you know. And of course, what happened here in Kuortane is the reason that we have such strong links with America, the Finnish in America, is because the tradition here was that the oldest son inherited everything, which meant if there were 3, 4, 5, 6 other brothers, they were left with nothing. So either they had to find a wife who was the sole kind of inheritor of their farm but needed a husband, or they went to America. And so that's why they went to America.
In a previous episode, we discussed the emigration from this region way back in season 1, and that was something that was talked about, big families and not enough farm to go around, basically.
Well, the house that we live in, our summer house that we live in, was actually built with American money. My wife's great aunt's husband's father went to America because he was, I wouldn't say dispossessed, but he was left with not enough. So he went to America and he worked hard in Michigan, probably in the copper mines or something, saved up money, then came back and bought the land. So for instance here, my father-in-law makes a distinction between those of us who've inherited the land through family and those of us who went to America, worked, you know, all 24 hours a day for 6 years or something, and then came back.
Are they seen as the nouveau riche?
Yeah, nouveau riche, nouveau riche. Yeah, they, you know, and this happened like 100, 150 years ago. But my father-in-law, he said, no, they bought their land, you know. So that's it. But the other thing about tar was like 200 years ago. I'd just been doing a little bit of research the other night on the Finnish War. The war between Sweden and Finland. Now don't forget, Finland, including this area, was just a eastern province of the Kingdom of Sweden 200 years ago, up until 1809. And so what it was that all this tar that was produced here, when Finland was still part of Sweden, it had to be marketed, or it had to be sold through Sweden. It had to go to Sweden, where they taxed it. So that affected the market here, in that the price of it affected the price of tar and the profits that were made because of this taxation by the King of Sweden. So it was still meant that it was profitable, and it certainly was a significant factor in the economic consolidation of wealth in this area from generation to generation. So this tar was very important. But tar was such a strategic resource that the British were prepared to go to war for it. So for instance, in 1808, the British were backing the Swedes against Russia because they didn't want Russia to take over, or they didn't want the Swedes to make a treaty, as they eventually did, with continental Europe and end up selling their tar from here to Napoleon, because Napoleon was the great rival and the enemy.
There are echoes in modern day times with oil under the desert. That countries are supporting each other or going to war with each other for a natural resource that is in another country. That's nothing to do with it.
Well, again, the British were behind it. I mean, the British, surprisingly enough, during the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Copenhagen, where Nelson got his, I can't remember, was his eye or his arm was shot off or whatever. But, so the British had a big influence here. And the reason that Britain was so interested in the Baltic and Finland, and by extension Sweden and Russia, was because things like tar, that was really important to them. Obviously, with the advent of steamships and steel ships and so on, then the importance and the value of and the uses of tar declined. But tar was still, up until the age of steam, a very important strategic resource.
So is there something about the terrain of the Nordics, or Finland particularly, that meant that it was easier or better to make tar here than in the UK, for example?
Yeah, because you've got these huge pine forests.
Right.
You've got a natural resource, which was, in those days, if you're chopping down trees with an axe, I mean, it wasn't going to disappear. And in fact, the Finns have traditionally, historically, looked after their forests, and so there's been no kind of deforestation of the country as you see in Britain, say, for instance, in the British Isles,
or in Brazil, in the rainforest,
or Brazil, or what's happening now in Brazil. So the forests were intact, they were abundant, and they were, you just walked out your kitchen door, and there it was. So it was, you didn't have to go far. You just kind of walked up the hill and started chopping down trees.
So maybe we should talk about how they make tar, and that's partly will lead on to what we're talking about this week, taking place in Kuortane, this Terwaviikko or Tar Week. We've come to talk to you today. Maybe in the background the listener can hear the occasional sound of a chainsaw. That's because there is a team of people from the local Lions Club chopping up wood and making this tar pit. But maybe you can talk us through the process, which starts well in advance of this week, doesn't it?
Okay. The first thing I want to start off with how I got started on this, how I got involved in this, because I was here many years ago, and I was watching this, actually around about this stage of the process, and I was watching them doing the work, and I was with a Jamaican British friend, and like we made the joke, because we didn't realise the significance of this process and this tar and how it was made and how it was exported. And then we made the joke that if there wasn't Kuortane tar, there wouldn't be a British Navy, there wouldn't have been a British Empire, there wouldn't have been colonialisation, and there wouldn't have been slavery from Africa to took our ancestors from Africa to the Caribbean and to North America.
Tar has got a lot to answer for.
The joke. But there's just a bunch of guys in the woods, making this tar. But actually, it's kind of a bit. You have to kind of use your imagination to realize how influential historically this process is. So then over the years I got more and more involved in helping out, and it's quite a technical process, and I'm still a bit of an apprentice. I'm still learning, but one of the things what I've seen from the beginning is that tar pit now is it represents all the old tar pits that are on this map here, the 400 that were in people's backyards 200 years ago. So what we have now is you've got as you might have noticed that where you find pine forests, there's often sandy soil. There's light soil, so there's sand. So in fact, if you look around the pit, you'll see that it's sandy soil. Yeah. And if you go down far enough, you might hit maybe a layer of clay, and then you'll hit the bedrock. But it's not too deep. So the tar pit is about, what would you say, it's about 10 meters across, 10 meters across, and in diameter, and at the bottom is a drain. I'm going to call it a drain. And that drain there's a steel pipe in there to keep it open, and that drain goes down and then along and comes out at the side of the pit, which is built up, and it comes out. So gravity is going to pull the tar down.
Right, okay.
Because when the tar is beginning to sweat out of the wood as it heats up, it's going to be pulled down by gravity and comes out just like a drain. The stuff comes out that way. What we did this morning was that I think on Thursday night they put down that matting on the bottom, which is waterproof, but it's also going to stop the tar actually seeping into the sand. So it actually seals off the bottom, and with the drain in the middle, as you see, it's like a bowl with the drain at the lowest point. And then what we started to do today is we started to get the wood. Some of the wood is chopped, and then it has to be axed again to split, like the logs you put in your sauna. It has to be split again. Now, the other thing I should say before I forget is that wood that we're chopping up today has been cured for 3 years now. And if you look at these pine trees here, I went out one day with them, and what they did was they stripped the bark off one side of the tree, and then that produces a resin on that side.
So the side that's been stripped produces resin, I guess, to protect the wood. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to call it resin because I couldn't find the translation in English of the word pihka in Finnish. So resin was the best thing I could find. And you saw the resin. It's kind of, I've got pictures of it. It's a kind of greenish, greyish,
like
kind of
waxy
mould,
sort of,
wax thing. And that is very important in terms of producing the tar. So if you look at a typical piece of wood that we've been chopping up today, it's about maybe a half a metre long, and it's split like the wood you put in the oven for the sauna.
Yeah.
And then on one side you'll get this pihka, resin, and then on the other side the wood. And that is all, as you saw, stacked tightly, facing downwards.
You can see from the pictures
Yeah.
a beautiful sort of geometric
Yeah,
shape of this
yeah.
thing going round
Yeah.
and round and round
But
in a
actually,
sort of spiral.
but I,
almost.
as an apprentice tar maker here, I'm the most I've managed to do is the wheelbarrow stuff, like carrying and fetching and stuff like that. I could do the axe work, but I'd probably be here for a couple of months if I had to do the axe work. So the guys doing the axe work, they're just quite good and quite quick. So I just do the wheelbarrow stuff, and I just deliver these wheelbarrow loads of wood to the guys around it, and they're going round in circles and then going towards the bottom. One of the technical things I was asking today was that when we started this morning, the wood was facing downwards, like it was like going down into the bottom of
like funneling down to the
funneling
centre.
down, yeah. But now it's actually building up, and in fact the centre where the pencil is,
Yes.
that is an indicator of how the fire is going to burn.
The pencil is.
Okay. The pencil,
okay.
the pole in the middle.
Yeah, I saw there was like
Yeah.
a small tree trunk standing up in the middle.
And that kind of pins all the other bits.
Ah, okay.
But it also it will fall eventually. But you'll see as the fire burns over the next week or so that it kind of, you can measure how it's going
so
down.
it has a structural purpose and then also an indicator purpose in the
it's an
burning
indicator.
process.
And
Okay.
also the amazing thing I was looking at today was that there's a temperature gauge in the middle.
Okay.
And there's wires. I can't remember what the wires are made of, but last time I was here, 3 years ago, the center, the core of the fire reached 300 degrees centigrade plus, and this wire's still there, and it's showing us the temperature. I don't know how that works. I mean, what it's made out of, why it doesn't melt, I don't know. But anyway, that's there. And then tomorrow when we finish it, it will probably come up to about 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters off the ground.
So that's 1.5 meters off the ground, but a couple of meters
But
down
it goes
as well.
down as well.
Yeah.
And then on top of that will be chucked on all that moss and stuff on top, which actually damps down the top. And there's this weird kind of thing about this tar burning, is that they're actually starving the fire of oxygen.
Okay.
They don't want to give it too much oxygen, so putting this stuff on the top actually dampens down. And it does burn at the edges where it's exposed to the air. It does burn, but what's happening inside is you're getting this kind of sweating, cooking process where the wood actually sweats out the tar, and then it the resin, and it just drips down into that drain and then comes out the bottom.
So
put into barrels.
You said before it's a kind of viscous liquid. What is it? Is it black or brown?
It's a blackish brown.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's good quality, it's black or brown.
Yeah.
I'm not expert enough to be able to look at this tar and say, "Oh, that's good." That's 2022. That was a good year.
Good vintage.
Good vintage. So I'm not sure I could do that, but I can see that when it's relatively fluid and clear.
Yeah.
You can actually, if you put it in a bottle, you can see through it. It's a kind of light brown, orange color, and then when you have a whole barrel full, it looks black.
And is it the smoke that gives it the darker color?
Yeah, that's the thing I learnt last time, was that because I had to watch the fire overnight, and one of the things I was told to look out for is if the is smoke coming off the top through all that moss and all that green stuff on top. If the smoke coming up is kind of white, steamy smoke, then that's fine.
Okay.
But if it turns black, that means the tar itself is burning. The fire is too hot, and it's actually burning, because the tar will eventually catch alight if it's too hot, like oil. It will burn. So the trick is to
And so if it is too hot and it's black, do they put more of the moss around it to try and cool,
dampen
and that cools it down?
Yeah. Or they'll actually pour water on it. You might see. They don't seem to worry about rain at all. You know, the rain is not a problem.
I guess moss and water are natural materials, so it's all part of the process.
Yeah, so they don't worry about that. But one of the things that one of the side products of this wood tar making process is charcoal.
Ah, right. Okay.
Because at the end of the week, there'll be a whole pile of charcoal, and a guy comes and collects the charcoal, and he pays the Lions Club money for the charcoal.
Yeah, and then he sells that on for people to use on their barbecues. Probably.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that you see. When it's set alight on, you're coming back on Wednesday.
Yeah, for sure.
When it's set alight on Wednesday, when we start having to push it, we have to keep pushing it, opening it up so that it burns faster or slower. So sometimes you're shoveling sand on it to damp it down. Sometimes you're with a shovel kind of thing, you're dragging it out so that you get more air into it. So it actually has to be managed over a week, and there's going to be somebody there all the time, 24 hours a day watching it.
That's interesting. So is there anything else to tell about the actual making process, or can we move on and talk about the Terwaviikko?
I think that's the basics of how it's made. As I said, like, I've asked the guys many times, I said, like, where did you learn this stuff? Like, how did you learn to do this? And this is quite obviously historically a skill, an indigenous skill that's been developed in this area over centuries, and that people just inherit it from their parents.
I do wonder with these kind of well, I guess with the first caveman learning how to make fire, but how did the first person?
I don't know.
How did it come about?
Somebody must have been sitting around the cave and thought, this piece of wood is sweating this resin. What can we do with this? And then we'll paint our faces with it, and then started realizing that if you coated wood with it wouldn't rot, or it was waterproof. So,
it's interesting.
But the other thing about that process is that I've got involved now. I'm a son-in-law, and I've got involved. I'm a foreign son-in-law, and I've got involved in this. And one of the things I have to say is that people have been very welcoming. They've been very pleased that I've taken an interest and got involved. And also they're quite proud. They're quite proud of this, that somebody appreciates the work that they're doing. And also I would say that, I kind of joke, because people here in Kuortane, they think I'm the exotic son-in-law from London and the Caribbean.
Hey, listen, we're both from London. I think you're the exotic one around here.
But I think they're exotic.
Yeah.
I think they're really exotic. Like, the stuff that they're doing here is like unique. Nobody else in the world is doing this.
I say this to Finnish people all the time, that you don't realise how your everyday cultural things are exotic to people like us who come here to live. Like, it's the fact people are making tar. I spoke to my parents last week and I said, how do you make tar? And they looked at me and scratched their heads, and they were like, this hopefully this interview will be interesting, and they'll all learn something. But what I noticed over there, like, clearly there's some older guys there in the Lions Club who've got this knowledge, and they're doing this Terwaviikko every 3 years, but also there's some younger guys there, so hopefully that's being passed on to newer generations.
And also the younger guys, they got big tractors.
Right.
They got flipping big tractors.
The new generation of farmers and landowners.
So you see the old guys are the guys with the axes, and the new guys are the ones with zzz, and the tractors. So
they're not silly, are they?
So there's a certain degree of mechanization going on over the generations, but it is hopeful. It's very optimistic that we can be optimistic that this is going to be passed on from generation to generation. I'm going to try and get their kids are going to come and have a look. Maybe when they're older, they might actually join in. So that's hopefully the future is going to be that this is going to continue, won't be lost forever.
So I think that's a good place to pause this conversation. Big thank you to Michael for his time. Glenn and I did some filming during the Terwaviikko week, so check the show notes for links to the video and photos from that day. Listener, we visited Kuortane several times while exploring Finland, so if the area is interesting to you, there's a few other episodes for you to discover. Episode 10, Finland's Olympic Training Centre, which was recorded just down the way from this episode in Kuortane. Episode 22, How Much Does Finland Love Ice Cream, that I mentioned in the intro. And episode 28, The Magic of Midnight Golf in Finland, which was recorded at Kuortane Golf Club. If you enjoy the show and want to show your support, then please take a minute to share this episode. You can spread the word to your friends on your social network of choice. Let them know about the show and invite them to explore Finland with us. Also, if there's a subject that you want me to cover in a future episode, you can contact me via the website or social media. I'll be happy to hear from you. So, until the next episode, goodbye. You've been listening to the Explore Finland radio show. You can find me online at explorefinlandpodcast.com. You can follow the show on your social network of choice. Facebook at Explore Finland Radio Show, Twitter at Explore Finland, Instagram at Mark Wiltshire. See the links in the episode description. And remember to subscribe, rate and review the show wherever you're listening or watching.